Hi, everybody. Welcome to English 116. My name is Lillian Ruiz. I am the instructor for the class, and I wanted to today review a little bit of what the class is about and what we will be doing over the course of the semester. And I know the semester began somewhat oddly with a snow day, but worry not because ultimately that is not going to impact us, as I will talk about soon. But basically, I'm assuming that you have some familiarity with Moodle or you wouldn't be watching this video. And if you went to the top of Moodle, you'll see a general section. And that basically is a place where you will have multiple icons that will help you navigate the course. So I wanted to talk about those first. And the very top icon is entitled Syllabus and Other Documents. And that is where I have uploaded our syllabus as well as our course outline, which I will be reviewing today. And it's where I would be uploading any of the other documents that I would normally share in a face-to-face class. And what I recommend is that you take hard copies of these so that you can easily access them. In fact, I've got a hard copy of the syllabus right here in front of me, the same syllabus that you'll find electronically. The decision is yours, but I think it's easier if you've got a paper copy that you can access very quickly. And you will see immediately underneath that there is an icon for past class sessions. So basically what you will see on our homepage on Moodle is our current week. And then at the ending of the week, I will retire that week and I will put it in the folder for past class sessions, which means that you can access that throughout the course of the semester. But basically what will be visible for you is the actual week that we are working on. And immediately underneath that, you will see that there's a folder for a discussion forum. So basically, what I'm going to be doing is posting videos like this, two of them actually each week. And you will have an attendance question at the ending of each of these videos to respond to in our discussion forum. And your response counts as attendance, basically. So that's where you would be putting your response in the discussion forum. You will soon find that the questions that I ask are opinion based. I want to focus on the idea of thinking and analyzing, less on regurgitation and on memorization. So the idea behind the discussion forum is to try to duplicate what we might do in a class discussion. Think of it as almost like raising your hand in class to submit in or to share an idea or an opinion. But more on that later. There is an optional chat underneath that, which is just that, optional. But if you ever wanted to chat with your classmates and or with me, you could do so there. And an optional Zoom. So if you were to open that up, you will see my Zoom information if you wanted to meet with me via Zoom. But what I'm going to talk about for the rest of this video is the syllabus and the course outline, which are in the syllabus and other documents folder. So I'm just going to go through this. And again, I recommend that you make a hard copy so that you can see it easily. And you'll see that at the very top of the syllabus document, I've just got some general contact information. That this is English 116A. It is on Moodle. My name is Lillian Ruiz. Most people call me Lillian. I'm pretty informal, but feel free to call me whatever you feel comfortable with. My office phone, so this will get you to my phone in my office, which is in North 328A, which is in the Inclusion and Diversity Center. If you haven't had a chance to visit, I encourage you to. It's a small suite where there is a kitchenette and there's a study area, and there is also a common room with some soft furniture and games. My office is there as well. So basically, anybody who supports the ideals of inclusion and diversity is welcome. And my office hours, which may or may not be of use to you because you are an online student, Monday through Thursday from 9 to 10 a.m., So if I'm not in a meeting, I should be in my office and you should be able to drop by. Or, of course, you can always make an appointment at any point for a time that's mutually convenient for us. So the textbooks. The first is entitled The Compact Bedford Introduction to Literature. So this is the 13th edition, but I will accept earlier editions. The difficulty with using an earlier edition is that obviously the page numbers will not be the same. And some of the material in the earlier editions is not in the later editions and vice versa. However, you can find the major texts in the Compact Bedford Introduction to Literature because we're going to basically be reading short stories and we are going to be reading dramas and we are going to be reading poems, and those you can find in the textbook, or I will be providing you access to those through links. Now, one of the plays that we are reading this semester is not included in the Compact Bedford Introduction to Literature. It was included in some of the earlier editions. It's called A Raisin in the Sun. I've ordered a paper copy of it. And again, whenever I can, I will provide you with links. And most of what it is in terms of studying literature can be found on the internet. And A Midsummer Night's Dream can definitely be found on the internet. I did order a paper copy from Pelican, which is a very respectable and respected edition of Shakespeare. But earlier editions of the Bedford Introduction to Literature had included A Midsummer Night's Dream. Unfortunately, the compact edition does not. So I've ordered a paper copy for you, but I will also be providing links as well, with a note that it is assumed that students will have a good dictionary and thesaurus for reference. Not that I expect you to buy a dictionary and a thesaurus, and I'm well aware that you probably have electronic access, but having access to something and using it are two different things, and definitely a thesaurus can help you with your writing, especially with trying to improve your writing through using synonyms, words that have similar meanings, and antonyms, words with opposite meanings. You can also find copies of these texts on reserve in the GCC library. So I wanted to go through some of the specifics of the class now. That the course description is that this course basically builds and extends on the academic writing process and skills introduced in English Composition 1. So all of you should have taken English Composition 1 or something comparable. Basically, that's an introductory English class where you learn how to write a college paper. So if you think you have not satisfied that requirement, please let me know. And what this class is a continuation of that we will continue to write papers, but this time your papers will be about literature, and for this particular class, about film as well, because we will be studying cinema as if it were a piece of literature. So basically, students develop close reading and watching skills from a variety of literary and non-literary texts, and hone critical research skills as well as research and documentation using a variety of genres that can include essays and fiction and poetry and drama and, of course, film. Writing assignments emphasize the formal, researched, and documented essay and include creative experiments and literary analysis. And this course includes a selection from a wide variety of authors. Obviously, we're not going to read everything in the textbook. And a wide variety of genres and text to engage students in written and visual analysis and research. We offer 3 versions of this class. You are in English 116, which is literature and film, but we also offer a introduction to literature, which is just literature without the cinema component. And a creative writing class is also something that we offer, but our class is the literature and film. And learning outcomes: after finishing this course, students will be able to develop an appreciation and understanding of film and literature. So we're going to need to work on some definitions at the beginning of the semester about what is literature and what exactly is cinema and what is the history of cinema. To see reading, writing, and observing as an ever-evolving process is something that you continue to develop over a lifetime. to use the rules of formal academic writing. Yes, there are rules, and these are the rules that you're expected to follow in writing in the workplace. So that's how that skill is transferable. But you should also have your unique sense of voice within those rules. You shouldn't sound like me or the textbook. You should sound like you. And I kind of liken it to driving, that we all follow the rules, but yet we all drive differently. And sometimes you can break the rules, but there's got to be a very good reason for it. You are going to improve oral and written communication skills. I put that on all of my syllabi. And effectively utilize word processing, email, search engines, and the internet in the study of film and literature. How do you find the information you need in the most efficient and time-saving way possible? And how do you verify the accuracy of that information? So, I'm continuing on with the syllabus and talking about procedures. Now, how am I going to run this as an online class? And what I try to do in my online classes is to duplicate as much as possible as what would happen in a face-to-face class. So basically, if we were meeting face-to-face, we would meet twice a week. And what I'm going to be doing is videos much like this one and posting them twice a week. And these videos will include the commentary that I would normally give in class. So you are going to be tasked with watching these videos. And then at the ending of the video, there would be an attendance question that you would respond to in the discussion forum. And basically that would be very similar to raising your hand in class, as I had indicated, and giving an opinion or asking a question or giving some commentary. And all of you will be doing that. And I will be responding to all of you. So you are going to be asked to read every response and my response in turn. That'll give you a good idea of what we would have talked about in a class discussion. You don't necessarily have to respond to your classmates. You're encouraged to, the way you would be in a class, but you are required to read what everyone has said in the discussion forum, and my responses in turn, because I will be responding to all of you. You have 48 hours to watch that video that I'm posting and to respond to the discussion forum. That's your attendance for the class. You'll soon see that, again, I like to ask questions that are opinion-based because I want you to think. I don't necessarily want you just to regurgitate memorized facts. And any additional interaction you have with your classmates in the discussion forum is participation, similar to participating in a live class. I'm well aware that some students learn best by participating, others learn best by listening, so you can decide how much or how little to participate, but you do need to read all of the responses. If you need additional time, because you have 48 hours in which to respond, just ask me for an extension and I will be happy to grant it to you. Any written assignments that you would be doing over the semester, those would be papers and a final exam, which I'll talk about in a moment in a bit more depth. You would be sending to my email, because this is how my grading program works best, via PDF. And my email is ruiz, R-U-I-Z, at gcc.mass.edu. And you might notice that my email does not have the first initial, it's just my surname. And the reason why is because when I started at GCC, we had not yet instituted an email program. I started in 1993, believe it or not. And when we did institute email, we first used surnames and only surnames until we very quickly realized that that would lead to a lot of duplication. And that's when we added in the first initial. So if you ever see an email address on campus that's just a surname, probably this person has been on campus for a good amount of time. And I ask that you send your information via your GCC email rather than any private email addresses. So course requirements, basically to do all of the reading and the writing assignments by the due date, to watch all of the videos in depth, to respond to the attendance form questions, There will be 2 out-of-class papers that I'll talk a little bit more about in a few moments. One will be approximately midway through the semester, so that gives us a good amount of time to talk about writing a paper. The other one will be towards the ending of the semester, and you actually have the opportunity to rewrite your first paper, because I see the first paper as being a kind of learning exercise. And the second paper would be very similar to the first paper. You would just be writing about a different piece of literature or a different film. So the second paper would be due towards the ending of the semester. And the final examination would be the very last day of class. Now, the final is cumulative, and it's open book, open notes. Again, I don't want regurgitation of facts. I want thinking. So I can tell you right now, the best way to prepare for the final is to do all of the readings assigned, watch all of the videos in their entirety, read all of the discussion forum responses, and you'll be prepared for the final exam. Because in one way or another, I will be discussing this final throughout the course of the semester, whether you realize it or not. Now, the institutional services disability statement you might be familiar with if you have taken other classes at GCC, but I just wanted to read to you that GCC values inclusion and equal access to its programs and activities, and is committed to fostering an environment of respect and full participation. Our goal is to create learning environments that are equitable, inclusive, and welcoming. So if there are any aspects of the instruction or design of this course that result in barriers to your inclusion or accurate assessment or achievement, please notify me as soon as possible. And if you're a student with a disability and you need a reasonable academic accommodation, please contact the Office of Disability Services, and the contact information is on the syllabus. So, attendance in that discussion forum that I was discussing, class activity and discussion is extremely important and can't be made up. So, absences and tardiness will be negatively reflected in your participation grade. While each case is different, anything more than 2 absences, 2 non-responses on the discussion forum could lower your grade. Excessive non-responses or absences could even result in failure. So, yet another reason to ask for an extension if you're unable to meet a deadline. Consultations, you can meet with me during office hours, or of course you can make an appointment with me. Now, the papers that I was talking about, the information on your syllabus about the papers is mostly logistical. So this is what you're going to need when you're actually writing the paper. That the paper will be sent via PDF to my email address, Ruiz, R-U-I-Z, at gcc.mass.edu. That paper should be typed, double space, have 1-inch borders. Pages should be numbered. There should be a cover page, which is a separate sheet of paper or a separate screen that includes the paper title, which means your paper should be titled your name, the course and section number, my name, the paper number, and the due date. And hopefully this sounds familiar from previous English classes you've taken, but we will talk about it much more in depth as the semester progresses. I know I'm giving you a lot of information, and I don't expect you to remember it all. I just wanted to give you a holistic overview. Please be sure to keep a copy of any paper you submit for yourself. That's always a good idea for anything that's important. And I will distribute paper topics during the term. You can choose one of those, or you can create your own as long as you get permission from me. And it's based on one of the texts that we are reading in class, or one of the films we are viewing in class. And as I indicated, you have the option to revise the first paper, which is due approximately midway through the semester. It'll be a 4 to 5 page paper, and it'll be a critical paper, which means that you don't need to be using any outside sources. And after I return it back to you, if you would like to revise it for a higher grade, I just ask that you submit in the revision along with the original graded copy, so I can compare and contrast the two, and that you do so before the ending of the semester, so you have some time for that. Paper number 2 will be very similar to paper number 1. The difference is that you'll be writing about a different text. So basically, you can take what you've learned from paper number 1 and my commentary and just apply that to paper number 2. And the final exam, as I said, will be cumulative. It'll be an essay exam, but you will have choice. And basically, it'll be an overview of some of the topics that we've talked about over the course of the semester. And in terms of the section on plagiarism and artificial intelligence, I'm just going to skip that for next class and go to grading. And just to give you an idea of how the structure of the grading is going to be working. And by the way, I'm not using the grading program in the Moodle form, so you can ask me about your grades if you want, whenever you want, but you can see that you can calculate your grades as well fairly easily. 25% is the participation, the discussion form. So this is pretty high. 25% is just answering those discussion forum responses. That counts as your attendance. 25% is paper number 1, which you can rewrite for a higher grade. So that's a good 50% of your grade. Paper number 2 is 25%, and paper number 2 is basically another way for you to practice your writing skills. It'll be very similar to what you did with paper 1. So you can incorporate the skills from paper 1 into paper 2. And lastly, that final examination, the open book, open note essay exam is 25%. For an A, excellent, a B, good, a C, satisfactory. I'm well aware that there are other letters that come after C for evaluation, but I'd prefer not to discuss them, particularly on the first day of class. So, and you can see also that there is criteria for essay evaluation, and I'm going to save that until we start talking about how to write a paper in the next few weeks, and then we can discuss that. So I wanted to move ahead to our course outline. And again, I recommend that you take a hard copy of it. You can find it in the syllabus and other documents folder, with a couple of caveats that dates and assignments may be subject to change. Assigned readings should be completed before the dates indicated. And all the films listed may not be available for free online. So keep that in mind. But whenever I can provide a link for you, I certainly shall. So if you'll remember, I was talking about that we are trying to duplicate what we would normally do in a face-to-face class. And in a face-to-face class, we would meet Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. So our first class should be Tuesday, which is today, if you're watching this video on Tuesday, which means that the snow day would not have impacted us because the snow day was a Monday. And if you look at the course outline for week 1, the 27th, Tuesday, you can see I have listed just the introduction, which is basically my reviewing the syllabus and the course outline. And then for Thursday, there will be another class video. And what I'm hoping is that you do the readings before the dates indicated, because this is what I'm going to be talking about in the class video. So things will go much easier for you if you've done the reading ahead of time. And the readings are Reading Imaginative Literature on pages 1 through 7. Critical Strategies for Reading, 1641 to 1662. Again, if you are using an earlier edition of the book, the page numbers will be different. Do not panic if you have not had a chance to do those readings. They are introductory readings. They are not the actual literature or the films themselves, because I'm very well aware that at the beginning of the semester, everybody is adding and dropping and getting books and so forth. So what I wanted to do was to start the semester slowly with some background information before we actually start analyzing literature and film. So in week 2, on the 3rd of February, we'll do a little bit more of that introductory work. We'll talk about reading fiction. We'll talk about watching and analyzing films. I'll actually have a handout for you that I will share with you then. We'll talk about writing about fiction, and we'll talk about writing about film. And again, I have another handout for you that I will be sharing with you then. And then on the 5th, this is basically our last introductory class. We'll talk a little bit about the writing process and how to write a paper. I ask you to skim the glossary of literary terms. And by skim, I mean skim. I don't expect you to read the entire glossary. I just want you to know that that's a resource that's there. And I want to introduce two names to you during that class on the 5th, Orson Welles and William Randolph Hearst, who are going to be very important for our first film. Because one of the things we're going to talk about when we talk about cinema is the film Citizen Kane, a film that came out in 1941, so it seems incredibly removed from our time period. And it still, after all these years, appears in the top 10 list for the best film ever made. Oftentimes, it's number one for the best film ever made. Basically, if you're going to learn anything at all about cinema, you have to know about Citizen Kane. So, we will watch Citizen Kane. Now, if you've watched it before, obviously, you've got a little bit of an advantage, but it's very similar to reading. That each time you read a poem, let's say, you're able to get more nuance out of it. It's the same with film. But this is an introductory class, so I'm assuming that everything is your first time. But certainly, if you've seen it before, you don't want to say, well, I don't need to see it again. You definitely need to see it again. Each time that you see it, you'll be able to pick up more information about it. And Citizen Kane will be one of the texts that you could write about for your first paper. So we will watch Citizen Kane. I will try to provide you with a link, but again, all films listed may not be available for free online, but you can find Citizen Kane certainly on streaming services and also in the GCC library. But thus far, I've been fairly successful with finding links for the films that we've been watching. And you can see we've got multiple classes devoted to Citizen Kane because we're going to actually watch that film twice in class. First, we're going to watch the film just the way we would as a viewer, and then we're going to watch a film critic by the name of Roger Ebert review that film, basically scene by scene, shot by shot, talking about how and why it's so important. So I've never seen a better analysis of a film than what Roger Ebert has done. And the name might be familiar to you. Very respected film critic. So we've got enough time to watch Citizen Kane, to talk about Citizen Kane, to see a review of Citizen Kane, and ultimately to talk about writing papers. So it's not until week 5 that we're actually getting into reading some of the literature. By then, you should definitely have textbooks and be settled in. We'll talk a little bit about 2 short stories, A Secret Sorrow and a Sorrowful Woman. And even though the title sounds similar, the stories are very, very different. One is considered to be fairly sophisticated and worth academic study, and the other is not. And we'll talk about why. And then some of these stories might be familiar to you. Perhaps you know The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. And it's a very short story. It's only a page long or so. And again, whenever I can find links to these short stories, I will be providing them to you. And Rose for Emily, again, another short story that you might have heard of by William Faulkner. That one's a little bit longer, and you can see that I've included the page numbers for where these stories appear in the Compact Bedford edition, the 13th edition. Of course, if you're using an earlier edition, you might want to use perhaps the table of contents or the index to find where these pieces are. And there's also an interview from William Faulkner entitled On a Rose for Emily, where I thought we could talk a little bit about the author's perspectives about his writing that particular story. That gets us into week 6, March 3rd. We will read a short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne, very famous, entitled Young Goodman Brown, that takes place in New England. So in some ways, it's very applicable to us in the sense that GCC is in New England. Soldier's Home by Ernest Hemingway, another short story. And then we will end our fiction unit, which is made up of short story and film, with 2 short stories, one entitled Battle Royal, which is actually a section of a novel entitled Invisible Man, and a story entitled Popular Mechanics. So then we get to move forward to our new unit. So it's around this time period that I'm thinking you would hand in your first paper. But I'm going to be giving you paper topics soon. The paper, at least according to our syllabus, is going to be due on March 26th, which is after the spring break, because by that point you would have completed the fiction section. But I have rolling deadlines, and what that means is that you can hand in a paper after that. And more importantly, you can hand in a paper before that. And I very much encourage you to hand in early papers. So once you've decided what you want to write your paper about, and once I've given you the paper topics, you can hand in a paper. And it's to everybody's advantage for you to do it sooner rather than later. And yes, you can submit in a paper after the 26th, but I'm beginning to get a little bit anxious because ultimately this puts us more than halfway through the semester. And if you haven't had a paper in by then, you definitely want to do so soon because you want that feedback. So, what we will do as you are working on your paper is move to our next unit, which is about drama and film. So, we'll talk a little bit about an introduction to drama. What is it? What are the elements? And so forth and so on. Writing about drama. And then we'll read our first drama, a very old drama. It's entitled Oedipus the King. And that drama is one of the dramas that ultimately helps to define drama. And as I'm looking at this and I'm looking at page numbers, I'm thinking there may be a mistake with these page numbers. These page numbers may be from the older text. I'm not sure. So let me double check this and make sure that the page numbers are correct. I'll check in for you by next class. So, at any rate, Oedipus the King, and we will watch a film, a dramatic performance of it. It is ideal to see a film live, but sometimes you don't have the opportunity, and the logistics are quite complicated. So, if that happens to be the case, which is the case for us, we can at least watch it on film. And we've got multiple classes devoted to Oedipus the King, enough time for us to read the play and watch a performance and talk about it. And then we move to Shakespeare. And the same thing with Shakespeare is that we will see a performance, and we will also talk about we will see a performance and also talk about the actual drama itself. And one of the reasons why I think maybe the page numbers are wrong is because you've got page numbers here, but in the newest edition of the text, they didn't include A Midsummer Night's Dream. So let's see what's going on. Maybe I'm just reading off of a wrong piece of paper, but we'll see what's happening. And then we will finally finish with perhaps one of my favorite plays, A Raisin in the Sun, much more contemporary, written in the 1900s and written in America. And it also will be a play that we will watch a performance of, and also will be a play that we will read. So we've got multiple classes devoted to all of that before we finish up our drama section and move to our poetry and film section. And in terms of poetry and film, once again, we will have an introduction to what is poetry and how to read it and how to write about it. And then the film we will watch about poetry is a film entitled Dead Poets Society, which you can probably guess from the title is about poetry and many other things as well. And then we will read some poems after that. Shall I compare thee to a similar stay? You might be familiar with Shakespeare's most famous and most misread sonnet, The Sick Rose. Some of these poems are not necessarily, or some of these texts are not necessarily included in the newest edition of the textbook. So if that happens to be the case, I will be providing you with handouts. And you may or may not know The Sick Rose by William Blake. Very short poem, only about 8 lines long or so. Because I Could Not Stop for Death. You might be familiar with a poet named Emily Dickinson, local, and very important for our particular area, but very important in terms of poetry as well. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Again, a very well-known poem that oftentimes is misread. America by Allen Ginsberg. Coca-Cola and Coco Frio by Martina Espada, who happens to be a local poet at UMass Amherst. And finally, we'll end with Amanda Gorman, who read her poem in 2021 at the presidential inauguration, The Hill We Climb. This puts us into week 16. I have a catch-up class for week 16 in case we fall behind. And then finally, our final examination. Note that I have our second paper due on Tuesday, the 12th of May in week 16. And again, with rolling deadlines, you could hand in that paper up until the last day of class, which is just shortly after that, up until the 14th, but you couldn't hand in anything after the 14th. And that paper will be on drama and film. And the final examination. Now, the final is going to mostly be devoted to poetry because you would have had an opportunity to write a paper about short story and film. You would have had an opportunity to write a paper about drama and film, but you would not have had an opportunity to write about poetry and film. So the bulk of it will be on poetry. It will be open book, open notes. So basically, you're just synthesizing what it is that we've talked about. And there will be a couple of questions about the previous units. So the best way really to prepare for the final is to have read everything and watched all the videos and read all of the discussion forum responses. The final exam will be a series of essay questions for which you get choice. And what I will do is post that final on the 14th of May and give you 24 hours to respond. If you were taking it in a face-to-face situation, well, what you would be doing is responding in about 2 hours. But since that's an online situation, you would have approximately 24. Or actually, exactly 24. Not that you should spend 24 hours on it. You should spend approximately 2 hours. So that gives you an overview of the class. So my homework is to make sure that I have the correct page numbers for you. So more on that next class. And your assignment for today is to answer the first discussion forum question that I will be posting. And that is to introduce yourself. And feel free to upload video or audio, but not required. And that said, what I will do next class is begin to introduce the idea of literature and film. We'll talk a little bit about plagiarism, artificial intelligence, make sure that all of the page numbers are correct so we're all on the same page, literally and figuratively, and then continue on from there. So I hope you're all doing well, and I am doing well, and we will continue on when I post class by Thursday. To be quite honest with you, I'm going to try to post classes the night beforehand, if at all possible. But certainly by Thursday at 10, you should have a class. Take care. Bye-bye.